I guess you could say the gang is all here on Cannabis Chat Live. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We've got a great show planned for you to talk all about the delivery licenses, social equity. And before we got going, before we went to the break, we were talking about socially responsible capitalism. Joining us in the discussion room here, not only is my sidekick, David Rabinovitz. See, you're my sidekick now. You're not my co-host yet, but you're going to jump up here. I know you are, and become that co-host that I know you could be. At the top, we had Grant Smith Ellis with us, of course, who is the president of MassCan. He's also someone who is right in the middle of all the dealings that go on with cannabis in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And joining us now in the room is our old friend Aaron Goins joins us, and now we've got Morris Is it Party or Party? Party. Okay. And now I see popping in here, and he'll be soon popping up in our little cannabis chat room, is David O'Brien, who is also with the Massachusetts Cannabis Business Association. We've been dying to get David on too. So now that I've introduced everybody and I've got everybody on camera except for David, and he's going to pop up. There he is, magically. That's how that happens. David Rabinovitz, are you there?
I am, but we got a lot of dogs barking in the background. That's the challenge of living in a Zoom kind of time.
That's all right. We all get the dog thing. I'd like you to kind of dictate where we go with this conversation moving forward here. And I'm going to sit back and let you handle the hosting opportunity here.
Great. Well, so as everybody knows, what we're talking about today is the hot topic in Massachusetts, which is what's going on, not simply with the home delivery licenses, but the drama that took place where the trade association that represents the heavyweights in the industry, the Commonwealth Dispensary Association, sued the Cannabis Control Commission. And organically, a group that includes many of the people who are with us today organized, put together some efforts, and within 4 days dropped their suit. And then not long after that, a suit by Rev Clinics against the city of Cambridge was dropped. And what we're going to talk about is kind of what went on behind the scenes, the positioning, how people came together, what efforts they did, and how they were able to pull off what they pulled off in such a short period of time. And just so that everybody understands, we've got David O'Brien with us, president of the Mass Cannabis Business Association, not the CDA. We have 2 cannabis business associations in Massachusetts, with David being much more supportive, his association for social equity and the whole controversy around the home delivery license. Grant sat at the center of it. So we've invited Grant essentially as a guest host today because there's nobody who probably knows what went on behind the scenes better than Grant. So with that, Grant, I know that we spent the first 20 minutes or so just chatting about on a high level what happened, but how did the grassroots organization come to be, and what was the pressure point that you were able to apply? Because clearly, I doubt within a few days you could have impacted anybody's revenue in the stores. So it had to be some other pressure point.
Yeah, I think what it was it started by way of, a grassroots effort to first track down the businesses that were in the CDA, and their website wasn't as up to date as it could have been. But then it was a matter of getting that information out there. And part of the beauty, I think, of the modern online world, which I'm sure folks are seeing in the national news in its own context right now, with the shorts and crazy things with GameStop. But anyway, this was kind of an example of that. It was a proliferation of community discontent in a way that didn't affect, I don't think, consumers, although I did hear that some dispensaries had to take their phones off the hook because they were getting so many calls, but it affected employees. And what was happening was, whether it was, officers of these companies or internal employees or lobbyists, they were going to them and saying, how can you be part of an organization that would make an argument that would seek to invalidate an equity priority period and make it so that only brick and mortar retailers could deliver? How could you openly support such a thing? And then I think what also happened is that there were some reporting. I've already gone public with this, so I feel comfortable saying this, that members of the CDA's board, and I can report this here for the first time on air, as the lawsuit was about to be voted on, 3 different members of the CDA board were approached and told, you are the only member of the board who's opposed to going forward with this lawsuit. So why don't you just step down? So I think it was a combination of internal pressure on the companies and the CDA's internal approach to whipping votes, if we want to call it that, kind of breaking down, that led to the pressure campaign, and that led to the lawsuit being withdrawn.
Aaron, jump in and then add some more color to this.
Not much more really to add. I mean, Grant's thorough. Listen, to be honest about it, their behavior has been pretty disgusting for years now. I think we all recognize that. And the fact of the matter is the grassroots effort is extremely strong. It's much broader than any one particular entity in itself. And I think we come to a point now in our society where on certain topics, a line has to be drawn. And to me, I prefer to be on the right side of history. And social equity, I just don't understand why this is really up for debate. I think they have a perverse understanding of what social equity means. I think it's, on their standpoint, social equity is a mechanism for, as long as they can still profit in this substantially at the disadvantage of everyone else. And I think that we all were able to galvanize behind this, and each particular organization and association, we were all united at this one front. And I think that is what created this pressure. And additionally, this goes above and beyond just a lawsuit. And Grant and I exposed this earlier today. They're perverse in their way that they have exploited social equity participants in these LOI agreements that they are actively currently engaging in that are extremely exploitive. They strap social equity participants with mounds of debt of which they're never going to be able to escape from. And I find it very interesting that you can hide behind the shield of the CDA and sue against the delivery license while individual members within the CDA are actively trying to engage in negotiations to be part of the delivery industry using predatory terms in deals. So their hypocrisy has been exposed, and let's just keep on applying this pressure, in my opinion.
David, tell us a little bit about the CBA, what makeup of your membership, and how you guys stepped in on when the controversy started.
Yeah, so a lot of folks listening may not know the history of Mass CBA. We got started back in December of 2017 before anything opened on the recreational side, in part because we knew a new industry was coming, and it was really set up for those aspiring companies that were going to make their way through the pipeline. We knew CDA already existed and serviced the sort of more legacy players, the vertically integrated medicals, who on the one hand helped build this industry. They were the first movers in it, but on the other hand, may not always be so welcoming to competition. And I explain it to people when we pitch membership for Mass CBA. I want 1,000 members of Mass CBA or any trade association, because that's the industry we're trying to build. And from our very beginnings, we built our association around the values of inclusion and equity. It's a part of who we are. 2 of our board members are social equity applicants. Like, we don't just talk about it, we build it in. And it's strange because most people I've spoken to in my time in the cannabis space, which is since the spring of 2017, when I used to run East Coast government relations for Weed Maps, when you talk to folks and you say, hey, do you believe in social equity and making up for the travesty that was the war on drugs, you don't have to finish your sentence before people say, yeah, we need to do more to fix that. This was an opportunity for industry and companies to raise their hand or stand up and say, I stand for social equity, count me in. And companies came on one side of it or another, associations came on it or one side or the other. my sort of greater point is, okay, we have and I talked to Aaron about this earlier this week. We have an opportunity to do something with this. Let's make the most of it.
David, I want to ask you a question right off the bat. Why is there so much, and it's not just Massachusetts. I read about the social equity issues in California. I read about other states that have launched programs like Illinois. Every state seems to have this same stumbling block. They all say, we want to do right by social equity. And then in reality, it doesn't happen that way. Is that what we see when we talk about systemized racism in our businesses and in our culture?
Jimmy, I would say part of the challenge is intentionality is not action. Words on a page, on a ballot question, in a law, in regulation, out of the lips of commissioners who I have grown to respect, the original core of 5 and then the new makeup of the commission. I think it's going to take all of us to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. We don't know what it's going to look like, but what we've done so far in Massachusetts, I've not done this in other states, so I can't speak to what they've done well or not.
Yep.
I want us to do it more right than everybody else. I mean, I've spoken to commissioners past and present about trying to set up a social equity loan fund and really leaning into that. Industry has a huge, huge role to play in that right now. They have always. And how we do that and how we do it well. We love to do first in Massachusetts. We're first in so many categories. It'd be great to be first in this as well.
There's no easy way through that either, by the way. I understand that. I really do. I do want to bring Morris in because he represents credit unions. And you brought up the fact that the industry is trying to make funds available to social equity applicants. Does that trickle down onto the credit union side? And isn't that how credit unions were started, Morris?
Yeah, absolutely. Credit unions really were the people's answer to banks back in the day. And their whole reason for being was that regular people, i.e., 100 years ago, the people who were working in mills, they couldn't get a loan at the bank the way that, professionals could. Just the rules were just so restrictive. And you had a lot of immigrants coming from Canada, coming to the US for these great jobs that they heard about in the mills. But they had, of course, serious money problems. So they're going, how do we solve it? And the answer was, if we band together, if we approach this together, we can pool our resources and offer loans at reasonable rates. And so fascinatingly enough, and thanks for teeing it up like this, Jimmy, is we are poised to have this in the cannabis industry, whereas there is almost zero lending through traditional channels right now. But the most likely result of our new administration is that the Safe Banking Act, which has been sort of almost ready to go, is the least plant-touching, least controversial thing that a new administration can get through at the federal level. So if that gets passed, then wow, just freeing up the lending side of the entire normal traditional banking industry could be incredible for helping just everyone in the cannabis industry, of course, especially social equity people.
And
do we want to see descheduling, guys, or do we want to see the banks open? Or does if you deschedule it, it automatically opens the banking?
I think a step-by-step approach makes sense. And so banking first and descheduling down the road. But also let's get, I'm not trying to blank on the term. What is the term for helping people get out of prison who shouldn't be there?
Expungement.
Thank you.
Yes.
Can I ask a policy question to David O'Brien or to anyone else but I guess to David O'Brien first, if you don't mind. So I really respect what you were talking about earlier, which something we talked about earlier in the show, that Commitment to equity is not words on paper or even any single action. It's a pattern of behavior. But there are at least a policy question or two I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on. So we talked earlier in the day about a law that you might be intimately familiar with, which is 94G Section 3, subsection A1I, related to co-location of medical dispensaries as adult use dispensaries. So the first question is, in the context of the Rev Clinic suit, do you think local cities and towns should be able to have equity priority periods that exclude medical dispensaries from co-locating? And second to that, do you think we need a statewide law to incentivize local cities and towns to give priority to equity applicants when issuing local licenses?
I like the fact that cities and towns are getting their acts together when it comes to equity, because it speaks to what they value, right? My read and my sort of follow, I've not been involved in any of the lawsuits. We have not signed on any lawsuits anywhere. My read of that sounded like, and I'm not going to get this exactly right, but if you had opened a medical someplace, the town couldn't then not allow you to open a recreational there.
That was the argument that Rev Clinics had made, but in 3 different decisions by the single justice of the appeals court, the Superior Court, and the single justice of the appeals court again, that was interpreted to mean you cannot prevent them from opening, but that would permit a delay. So what I was asking is, do you think that kind of delay for the purposes of an equity priority period is appropriate?
Again, I'm not a judge or a lawyer, so I can't speak to the legality of that. I like the fact that communities are getting their act together. I mean, remember, this was all brand new to every municipality when the doors or the licensing process opened up. But one of the things I love doing is talking to people from out of state who say, well, you must be an expert on all things cannabis in Massachusetts. I'm like, first of all, it's still in its infancy. Right. Second of all, if I tell you an expert, anybody on these tiles is probably more expert than I am. And if you say you're an expert, it means you know everything there is to know about it. And we're still, in the second inning. If you're a baseball player, this is early days. So I appreciate the fact that social equity is becoming more of an issue. I appreciate that in Boston. It has slowed the process down, but arguably it has slowed it down to the point where it's intentional to provide for opportunity for real inclusion for licenses, not just employment, in the city of Boston, in Cambridge, in Somerville, and elsewhere.
I think it's funny you mention experts, because it's Beth Waterfall from Elevate Northeast who says there are no experts in the cannabis industry because it's only been around for a few years, even though we know that the product itself has been around for thousands of years, and everybody in the business thinks they are expert in whatever field that they're in. But if there's one expert on this panel, it's Grant. So I'm going to put him right back at it. Grant, go ahead.
Well, no, I guess it was just going to be a similar question, and I guess maybe other folks may have an opinion here, but there's 2 cases ongoing right now, Basque versus Taunton and Comcan versus I forget what it is. But those cases involve whether the land court has jurisdiction in the context of a special permit matter to influence local city licensing of cannabis licenses. And so the reason I bring it up is I'm really worried that there's a plan here by some corporate operators to try to expand the jurisdiction of the land court to undermine local licensing. And so I'm kind of wondering what folks think about those cases. And if you don't want to talk about that, what do you think about the SJC about to rule on Mediri versus Salem, which is the potential of the SJC, the Supreme Judicial Court, invalidating the need for host community agreements statewide? So those are my questions.
Great questions. Aaron, I bet you have something to say about that.
The HCA process is corrupt. It just allows for so many things to really infiltrate, and it greatly influences those who are larger, incumbent, and well entrenched, disproportionately. So if you're going to really have a conversation about social equity, and one of the overarching issues of social equity is the fact that there is a knowledge gap in some instances and a financial gap. And so removing that barrier where the shift in power that the HCA creates, in my opinion, helps to address the overarching issue of social equity, period, which is that we want fair equal inclusion within this marketplace. And you cannot achieve that when you have regulations in place that allows for concentration of power within each municipality that you're trying to go to. I'll give you the case in point. I'm in Abington, which is one of the 29 disenfranchised whatever places in the state, which I have a whole issue with that. Abington should not be included. But the moratorium lifted June 30th, 2019. My wife and I decided that, you know what? Let's figure out how this process goes. So we went to the town hall on May 15th, 2019. Went there and they said, oh, we already had 4 large operators come in and give presentations back in December. How is that possible when your moratorium doesn't even lift until the end of June? And these are people who have already done the process. It's copy and paste for them. And so us being a little person who have lived in this town for 15 years, and we said to them, is there any type of priority opportunity here in terms of we've lived here for 15 years, we're stakeholders in this town, we pay taxes in this town. So obviously we have a stake in how cannabis is actually executed in this town. They said, no, our lawyer said first in, first out.
Yeah.
And so this is what we're up against. So this is why the ACA process has to go, because it greatly favors those who are currently entrenched. And this is just this is like the easiest issue. There are, I mean, Grant knows there are so many barriers at the ACA process.
Say it can't go, Aaron. That comes back to my point earlier, and Aaron, maybe you want to weigh in. How crucial is it that there be some kind of mandate on the state level for local cities and towns to take into consideration? Why is there equity priority on the state level if we have a bifurcated application process that requires you to get the HCA before your state level license can really become final? It just doesn't make sense that there's no equity consideration there.
Well, I'll tell you exactly what this is. These people are big, they're powerful, they have a lot of money. All right. It's bad enough that this happened to them at the state level. They sure as hell are not in favor of this at the town level. So let's just be very honest and frank here. And like I said, this addresses a portion of the social equity debate that we're going to have here. I just don't see how we proceed in the discussion of social equity at a state level when you're not addressing it at the town level as well, too. And to me, it's just backwards logic, and it just has more light has to be shined on this more. I think a lot of people see, we're all within this. We're living, we're breathing this. We're every day. The average person can care less because they don't know anything about this. They just know that one day they wake up and there's a dispensary that just opened in their town. Right. They don't understand the hell that you go through, the months of lease payments that you're making. People have gone bankrupt trying to get into these towns and have nothing to show about it. Like, this kind of stuff has to be out there. People have to know about this. My wife and I have paying a fortune right now on something that we just purchased. Okay. And hopefully we're having our community action, our community outreach in 2 weeks in the town. But we're almost coming up on a year. We have put out 6 figures on lawyers, architects, all types of stuff to be prepared for this bullcrap ACA process. And it was like, it's just ridiculous. People have to know what's really going on.
David, I'm going to ask you again this question, and it's something I rail about all the time, being a longtime member of the media in New England. So frustrated that the public, this is still a niche industry, and there's still the people in it are very passionate about it, but the general public still does not understand anything about this plant, let alone trying to do business with this plant. There are no public service announcements provided by anybody in the media to talk about some of these issues and some of these injustices that the people that are in the business that have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars, like Aaron, there's no, I can tell that Jim Browdy gets a chance, and I'm sure you've got on his show. That's the one show in town that does give an opportunity for people to talk about it. But for the most part, the public is still in the dark. How frustrating is it to be in part of a business association in a niche industry that the public still really doesn't get?
Well, it's really frustrating, and I'm not an operator, so anybody on this call that is an operator and has worked with operators, I've heard the horror stories. I mean, one of the tenets of what we try to do is talk about the successes in the industry to let people know that the sky is not falling. We're how many years into this, and the sky still hasn't fallen, and you've collected a lot of revenue from this. The stigma is something to more normalize this in the general public's mind. We have to fight the stigma every day when there's a bad news story. This has been, to the general public, a controversial news week. I think with better outcomes in the sense of where we're headed. But I have to say something about the HCAs. You all probably noticed that Mayor David Narkowitz sort of did a pivot on this for Northampton and said, I don't know why we're collecting this. We're not spending this money. The text of what's in the bill that didn't pass the Senate and it'll be reintroduced in February by some senators and some House members is that an operator needs to pay reasonably related costs. Now, my mother can figure out what a reasonably related cost is for a new business. And if there aren't any, you shouldn't have to pay the ransom. Honestly, I mean, people are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to be in business in a town when they have no effect. And that's why Mayor Narkowitz has gotten rid of it. We're going to hope to recruit other people. We've been on the side of get rid of HCAs. We've supported the commission saying for 2+ years, give us the oversight and the teeth to get rid of these, or at least be able to monitor them so that people aren't being overcharged. No other industry would stand for this. And remember where this came from. In the 11th hour for the legislature in July of 2017, I know because I was lobbying on this issue, it was plucked out of the gaming legislation because they're like, hey, this sounds pretty good. Let's give communities a little something extra.
No, it was horse trading. It was horse trading. It was horse trading, I think, on the issue of local control over whether they'd be able to ban the marijuana enterprises without a vote of the constituents. I don't doubt, maybe you know more about the back end than I do, but I do not doubt that when Senator Brownsberger was negotiating that compromise on if it's a yes town, then you have to go to the voters. If it's a no town, I don't doubt that the HCA was part of, hey, we got to get these towns to really get behind this kind of thing.
Yeah.
The MMA, I mean.
Yeah, no, it was the MMA's fingerprints are all over it.
Well, the other fascinating thing in terms of thinking about the towns and this stuff is that I know for a fact at this point in cannabis legalization in our Commonwealth that the towns are absolutely sick and tired of having to update their ordinances seemingly every 6 months to keep up with what the commission is doing. Now, on the plus side, the commission on this last set of regulations has said, yes, we knew we had to keep revising and figuring this out and trying to get this on the right track to start with, but this is it for quite a while, so don't expect any more changes. So at least the towns get a little bit of a breather on like, okay, what are we doing now? What's the state doing now? What's the commission doing now? And the really fascinating thing to me is to look through some of the smaller towns' charters and see what kind of language they have in there. It's like this one small town I'm looking at, it's like, all right, you've got your usual building codes, you've got ordinances around solar panels and stuff like that. You've got ordinances around adult entertainment establishments, and you got rules around cannabis. It's like, those are the three things that a small town has to worry about. How weird is that? That's so weird.
No, that's America. I'm sorry. That's just what we all have to put up with. I'm looking at the clock. We're going to take a break. I know some people might have to bail, but and if you do, I certainly understand that. But we've got another couple people coming in after the top of the hour when we will continue with Cannabis Chat Live. Don't go away.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.